So we will call the meeting of the Transportation Circulation Committee to order. We'll start with a roll call.
Committee Member Bradley.
Here.
Kaufman Gray.
Here.
France.
Here.
Horn.
Here.
Rodriguez. Tabor.
Here.
Chair Blackerby.
Here. All right. We do have a quorum. I have not received any public comment slips for items not on the agenda. So first is our approval of minutes from our November 8th meeting. Were there any changes? No changes. Okay. Motion to approve would be in order.
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Oh, okay, good. Well, just one thing I noticed on the minutes it says November 8th, and on the consent calendar it says November 7th. I'm pretty sure it was the 8th. But the minutes are right. Okay, all those in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I'll be abstaining since I wasn't at that meeting,
Okay,
which I apologize for.
that's all right. We'll forgive you. We're going to kick you off the committee for not doing that. So Tabor abstains on that. Okay, so the first thing on our agenda is recognizing our outgoing members of the TCC for their many years of distinguished service, and there are sandwiches, but we wanted to commemorate your service with a little something, so I won't unpack both of them, but we just wanted to first recognize David Tabor for years of service, and this actually has the years of your service on it. So from 6/28/2005 to 12/31/2012. So lots of years of service. I want to give you a hand for everything you've done. I'll put this safely back in the box, and thank you for your service. But we know you're not moving totally on from doing the good volunteer work on boards having to do with transportation as a new member of the MTD board. So congratulations on that.
Well, I didn't want you to think this was just a stepping stone for me, but
That's right. You are using us. No, and also Mr. Bradley. And let's see what your years are. Let's see who beats who here. You did, in fact, start in 2005. So
We do everything together.
that's so nice. So I just want to thank you for your service and everything you've done. And obviously, you're not done being leaders in the community. So I appreciate that, and want to see if there are any other board members that want to share anything, and then maybe we'll let you say something if you want. Yeah, Mr. Kaufman Gray.
I just want to say it's been an honor to work with both of you these last 8 years. I'm going to miss you both, and your knowledge, both of your knowledge and transportation issues was greatly appreciated for the city and for this committee. And we definitely are going to miss you. And best of luck in the future.
Yeah. Great. Well,
just a
say something.
short note, if I may.
Sure.
I was thinking through the day all the projects, big and little, we've kind of had a chance to chew on the last 8 years, and I don't know if I want to go down that lane tonight, but I was just reminded at the interview session at City Council that this city is blessed in a number of ways, and one of which is just the many talented and passionate people that the city attracts and raises, and I've been proud to sit here at the table with a number of those over this past 8 years. And every exit is a new start, so thank you for a chance to serve.
Thank you. Mr. Bradley?
Yeah, I've enjoyed serving on the committee with all of you, and a lot of things happened. The whole Measure A thing happened on our watch. And I'll still be working a lot in this community on this with Coast. So if any of you finish your time and want to stay involved, you're welcome to volunteer with Coast. Okay, thanks.
right. And committee member Rodriguez has arrived. So we were just lauding our exiting committee members, Tabor and Bradley, and whenever our next meeting is, after the first of the year, we'll have some new folks filling their shoes, so attempting to fill their shoes. So again, thanks for your service. And number 4, basically an informational item, the monthly MTD report for October. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that one? Yes.
Well, I guess it's too early to talk about trends. You really need to look at annual 10-year trends, but we have had a number of a dip in ridership, maybe 10% or so in the past month on our lines 30, 31, and 32 that we monitor, and I guess that's all I wanted to say, that it's worth keeping an eye on, but a couple months down the road.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
I might
Yeah.
just point out that, we did raise the fare from 25 cents to 50 cents, so that might have a factor in that. I'll be doing a mid-year evaluation of where our revenues are in terms of the fare as part of the mid-year budget review, and maybe presenting a report to the City Council depending upon if we're coming close to meeting our revenue target in order to balance our contract. So that might have a part in it. I'll talk to Steve Moss in MTD to see if he has any insight as to if that is really the reason, if there's something else going on there as well. But we'll keep a close eye on it. And Dave, you'll be at the MTD board at the next session, so hopefully this will be a conversation before the MTD board as well.
Great. Yeah, Ms. Moore?
I think that I read in here that even though the ridership has gone down, that the revenue has gone up because of the fare going up. And so I'm just wondering if you have a comment on that, because I'm wondering if the people that are not riding anymore are locals that are used to using it really regularly. I mean, there's no survey information or anything like that, of course, so it's hard to tell. But anyway, it just was surprising to me that the revenue's gone up since the ridership's gone down, and I just wondered if there were any comments on that.
Well, they doubled the fare, so revenue ridership would have to be cut in half to
Right.
True.
revenue to go down.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but we were looking at raising an additional $90,000 plus or minus with the increase in fare, so I'm not sure if we're going to hit that or not. That's part of my 6-month review when we take a look at the revenue.
Thanks.
Could also be a dip with summer tourism being over, that it could be going down for that reason as well. And the weather's been real nice. So let's see. Any other comments on MTD? Yeah.
Chair
great.
Blackerby, yes. Just a quick question. Did we end up making any change for the service to the commuter lot on Carrillo?
Yes. Yes, we did. We eliminated the Carrillo lot shuttle service effective July 1st.
Has there been any significant comment from the public, or has there been any change in the use of the commuter lot?
We saw some people who did not renew their parking passes in the Carrillo lot. Some moved from Carrillo to Dakota. But we're averaging right around 10 riders an hour for an hour-and-a-half period, so it wasn't that significant of a service.
No.
We did hear people who were complaining about it, especially during this time of the year, because it's dark at 5 o'clock or 5:15 when they're leaving for work. But it was just a service we just frankly could not afford to provide.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Okay, so item number 5, a review pedestrian median refuge island installations. And we have our...
Yeah, Mr. Bailey will present this to the committee.
Great. All right.
Good
welcome.
evening.
Thank you.
My name's Derek Bailey. I'm with the city's traffic engineering group, and here to talk about pedestrian median refuge islands. So just the background. We've been evaluating tools on how to improve pedestrian crossings. And this really stems back to the fatal crash that happened on Milpas last year. And once that happened and we started looking at Milpas more carefully, we from then kept looking, and eventually got to a point where we're doing an inventory of all our uncontrolled marked crosswalks in the city, looking for opportunities to improve them, identifying the ones that are the most challenging to cross and making plans to improve them. And along with that is what kind of improvements can we make? And that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight. When we're talking about uncontrolled crosswalks, we're talking about crosswalks that cross the street that don't have to stop. No stop sign, no traffic signal. So basically the pedestrians relying on drivers to yield to them or just wait until there's a large enough gap in traffic that they can get across the street. Some of the things that can improve driver yielding, signs and pavement markings, limited effectiveness, but they do raise a driver's awareness that there's a crossing point. Curb extensions they improve visibility of pedestrians and as well shorten the crossing distance. Pedestrian flashers can raise awareness of a pedestrian crossing, and median refuge islands that we're going to talk about this evening. Other things that can help, street lighting, obviously, if there's a lot of pedestrian crossings after hours. But in terms of improving driver yielding, these are the most common tools in our toolkit. Median refuge islands, both the Federal Highway Administration and Caltrans recognize this as a tool to improve crossing conditions. Some of the research that's been done on the federal level suggests that there's a 46% reduction in pedestrian-involved crashes with the presence of a median refuge island. Obviously, every intersection is unique, but this is on average. As well, there's reduced delay for pedestrians because there's better driver yielding. So drivers yield quicker, allowing pedestrians to get across the street with less delay. And as well, the real safety benefit here is that pedestrians can judge conflicts separately. And what I mean by that is if there's no median refuge island, when a pedestrian is trying to get across the street, they have to look in both directions and analyze traffic and figure out when there's a large enough gap in traffic coming from this direction and this direction that I can get all the way across the street. If there's a median refuge island, then they can look this way, cross halfway, look that way, cross halfway. So that's the real safety benefit. And that's part of the delay reduction as well, because when you're waiting for a large enough gap in traffic that you have to cross all the way across the street, that can be a lot longer than when you just have to cross half the street at a time. We do have a few existing pedestrian median refuge islands in the city. The West Beach project added a few, Cabrillo Bath, Cabrillo and Chapala. Milpas and Ortega is under construction right now. We're quite excited about that. There's some painted median refuge islands in the city. A few examples, Laguna and Coda, just near the back corner of the city yards here. And as well, De Levine and Samarkand. There's a few others in the city. The painted median refuge islands, they create space for pedestrians to wait in the middle of the street, but it doesn't really add to the comfort level for pedestrians because they're not waiting behind anything. They still feel like they're out in the open. And as far as the Federal Highway Administration is concerned, they don't consider a painted median refuge island to be a true median refuge island. So while it does create space, it doesn't have the same operational effect that a raised median would. We've got a few projects with median refuge islands that are currently being designed. We recently got awarded a Highway Safety Improvement Program grant that we're going to be improving some crossings that stemmed out of the citywide crosswalk inventory that we're doing. State in Kaipala, Colorado, near Upper De La Vina Street, and as well Cabrillo and Anacapa. Excuse me. Kind of the common theme in the median refuge islands that we have and that are under design right now is they're on kind of more major arterial streets. Thinking back to last July, Ashley Shue, one of our design engineers, brought this project to the TCC that she's working on. It's the Cabrillo and Anacapa improvements. So if you'll just notice here where this is the median refuge island. This type of intersection, a T intersection, accepts median refuge islands really well. On the west leg of the intersection, there's this left turn lane, and then straight across from it is basically unused pavement. There's nothing there, so it's a great spot for median refuge island. But what we've been working on is trying to develop a concept for less major streets, and this is what we've come up with. We're calling it a mountable median refuge island, and I'll explain that term in a second here. But some of the features, this is just a typical intersection, like a collector, minor arterial type street. We've applied for a Measure A grant, and a few of these might potentially go into the east side neighborhood, like Mason Street in front of Franklin School. So it's a 40-foot wide street, one lane of traffic in each direction. There's typically on-street parking. So what we're showing here is a median refuge island, 30 feet long. It's kind of a wedge shaped, so it's 4 feet wide at the nose, and it flares out to about 8 feet. We're saying we want to keep at least a minimum 14 feet clear adjacent to the curb, so it's a fairly generous area that vehicles can still pass. But as well, one feature that we thought would be quite important is having it mountable. And this is a cross-section of that median, and this is roll curb, we call it. Vehicles can drive over that. You know, it's not comfortable for them, but if they do, it's not like hitting a vertical curb. They're not going to damage their wheels. They're not going to tear out the oil pan or anything if they go too far. But if they drive over it, they'll notice, and they probably won't do it next time. But as well, if there's large vehicles that have to get through this intersection, you know, it's a school bus turning the corner, moving van, Marburg, or even our emergency service trucks, our fire trucks have to get through here. They can drive over these things, and they're not impeded. We did check in with the fire department. They're supportive of this concept. We do want to talk to them before we go to final design about it, but they said in the school areas that they can support something like that. You know, they did mention, you know, if something like this prevents a crash, and from us even having to respond to them for an emergency, it's a good thing. So like I said, it's designed for crossings on collectors and some minor arterials, utilizing roll curb. And like I said, we did check in with the fire department, but before we get towards any final design or anything like that, we will check in with them again. We do have a Measure A application that we're working on right now. We've got, as part of that application, 6 proposed locations near the Franklin School, Adelante Charter Campus on the east side, and as well 3 locations adjacent to the Lacoumbra Junior High Santa Barbara Community Academy campus. 2 of those locations are on Modoc Road. We recently had a slurry sill project on Modoc Road, and we created painted median refuge islands there. So the space is already there. It's just we would be adding the raised feature. And as well around the corner on Portasuelo and Gillespie. We do have another project. It's a separate project that we've applied for Measure A for, and that's to improve 3 crosswalks on Upper De La Vina Street, Arden, Calle-Morales, and Samarkand. And this is a picture at Samarkand, and you can see there's a painted median refuge island there, so we'd basically just be filling in that space. This is the only location on Upper De La Vina that can easily accommodate a median refuge island. Like I said, they're great tools to get pedestrians across the street, but the issues at the other 2 intersections, this is Calle-Morales. This is the crosswalk that we want to enhance, crossing De La Vina. Where the cursor is here, if you can see where these 2 pavement arrows are, that would be just a great place for a median refuge island. The problem is we've got this driveway here on the west side of the road, and a median refuge island right there would block left turn access to that driveway. As well, Arden Street, just a little bit further south. Again, crosswalk we want to enhance. Right where these pavement arrows are, again, great location where we would want to put a median refuge island. But again, we have driveways on either side of the road that would both lose their left turn access if we were to install a median refuge island.
Could you go back to that last slide?
Sure.
Is Ardent, is that like Ralph's and the liquor store, that big building on the right?
Yeah. I believe this is Ralph's parking lot right here.
Right,
Ralph.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Wrong way. There we go. So this is a map of some existing median refuge islands in the city. Like I said, Milpas and Ortega is under construction right now. The two on West Beach. All the black dots are either under design or locations that we have applied for a Measure A grant to install. So with that, I'd ask for any comments, questions.
Okay, does anybody have
One of the
questions?
things that we had talked about internally, if you go back to the photograph, like on this one here, is it does, median makes sense there, but blocking off left turn access into these two driveways may be problematic at this location as well as the other location further up the street. And we wanted to get feedback from this committee whether or not this is something that you feel is worth pursuing. Is pedestrian safety in this area a priority versus a car being able to turn left into their driveway versus maybe they have to take a different route to get into these driveways?
Well, I have a question on this one. Show us again which left turn you couldn't make anymore.
So if you wanted to make a southbound left turn into the Ralph's parking lot, if you wanted to make a outbound left turn out of the parking lot, a northbound left turn into this parking lot, they do have
There's a
secondary
hole there,
access
yeah.
there, so that should be able to be accommodated. And as well, depending on how long it is, it may affect outbound left turns.
Okay. One thing I would say about that last one at Dillian and Arden, most people go in and out of the two driveways, the bottom right of the screen from that
Yes.
Ralph's. So that's usually where they go. There's a Chinese restaurant up, which I've never seen any people in, but that up top there is kind of the entrance. It seems like the people use for that, but I think what I've seen living or going up De La Vina quite a bit is that people use those two other things to get into Ralph's.
Shopping centers, the third driveway, so to speak, the one that aligns with the rear of the stores is typically used for deliveries.
Yeah, I think they use there's like yet another entrance on the other side too.
So I don't know if there's what kind of delivery traffic there is in and out of here, but that could be a concern.
Would talking to, or has that happened yet, or would that happen after this, talking to those businesses?
We would talk to them after this meeting. And frankly, we wouldn't really even have that conversation unless we're successful in getting the Measure A grant.
Sure, okay.
Are successful in getting the Measure A grant through SBK.
Right. Okay, so questions on this? Yeah, Mr. Bradley?
Is there a refuge island right now at Cliff and Loma Alta? I think.
Yes. I wouldn't classify it as a median refuge island designed specifically for pedestrians. In terms of a refuge waiting area, that median, if it's the same one I think you're thinking of, has a fence on it.
Right.
And it's really to encourage pedestrians to use the crosswalk instead of everybody dumps off the bus and goes straight across the street, which isn't a good thing.
It's more of a median.
It's more of a
not
median
island
barrier.
Right.
It does provide some protection, though.
It does,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
And when the city takes over Cliff Drive, would there be any other good locations along Cliff Drive, do you think?
We've been working on that. Yes, there are a number of T intersections. If we go back to, I went the wrong way. If we go back to that drawing that showed this, we look for T intersections, and that space straight across from that left turn lane is good. Cliff and Oliver, I know right off the top of my head, west of Meigs is a really good location that would we did identify 2 or 3 locations in between Meigs and City College as well there where something like this would fit.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah, Ms. Horn.
If we apply for the Measure A funds and this is approved, and then there's objections from the businesses because of the problems with turn lanes being blocked, and it's decided not to proceed, then what would happen then?
The money, if we don't spend all the money would revert back to the Measure A pool of funds, and it would be available for allocation in the next cycle.
This is a 3-year cycle,
Yes.
so not for 3 years.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Tabor.
We're just taking questions now?
I see no public comments, so we can question
and comments?
everyone.
Okay.
Sure.
I'll hog the mic then for a little while. The question I did have, though, we had some comments 6-8 months ago regarding pedestrians in the crosswalks and what the law is regarding pedestrians in the crosswalks. Does that change at all if there's a pedestrian refuge island? If someone makes it halfway across the street and isn't standing raised in the middle of the street, is it the oncoming traffic's requirement to then stop and allow them to pass?
Yes, there is no legal break in the crosswalk, even if you're on the other side of the median, and as soon as you step into the street, as long as you've reasonably done so, at that point, all vehicles are supposed to yield to you, regardless of which side of the median you're on.
Okay. So really, in that sense, a refuge island, when I was first looking at this, I was imagining children standing in the middle of the street and cars whizzing by at 10% greater than the speed limit, and thinking that was not a good thing, but I think the sensibility of the drivers would kick in, and with the regular crosswalk laws here, and really make that as something that would encourage more people to get across the street. So I'm encouraged that this would be something that would do that.
Yeah. One of the features of this style of median refuge island that we're proposing here, it's a visual cue. We do have pavement markings. We do have our fluorescent green signs that we put off to the side. They blend into the background after a while to some drivers. If they consistently drive through a crosswalk every day, and if they don't routinely encounter pedestrians, they get trained in their minds that this isn't something I usually see very often, and it just becomes part of the background. So this added feature will serve as a reminder. This is a crossing place. This is where you should expect to see somebody.
Okay. I guess another question then, would they ever be employed without any of the other tools in the toolkit? Would you put this in without painting stripes for a sidewalk? Would you put this in without a flasher? Or is this something that would stand alone, in your opinion?
It could be independent. I would say typically if there's enough pedestrian demand that we would consider something like this, there's likely a marked crosswalk there. An alternative to this, let's just talk about Mason Street in front of Franklin Elementary School. An alternative is flashers. There's no hardscape in the roadway, no impact to the roadway at all. But are flashers appropriate in a neighborhood type setting? Do you want that going off outside your bedroom window? That's one thing to consider. We do have plans to install probably about 20 sets of flashers around the city. And
more commercial
just about every
areas.
location we've identified is more of an arterial type crossing. And with 20 of them, we are reaching the limit of how many the city can maintain. So once we start digging into the neighborhoods like this, there's a lot more potential locations. So something like this, once it's installed, it's there, and we don't have to maintain it.
Well, my observations are from driving along Cabrillo, where the marked walks are very visible. I've seen a marked difference in driver behavior associated with those. So I would think those in conjunction with something like this would be doubly attention-getting. And the only one of these only one of the painted medians I've watched and watched functioning was one over here on Laguna or Ortega, and about 20% of the drivers who go through there would have brushed up against that if it had been a curb. So I'm glad to hear that the roll type curb is being implemented there, and I think you're right, once bit, twice shy on that. But the other curious thing there is a lot of folks, when they see that striping in the street, thinks there's a stop sign there.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people come up to there and stop and look both ways, and the next person comes up and honks their horn gently, and then things move along. But maybe that'll be more learned behavior as we get more and more into these.
You brought up a great point in your comments, is the striping on the Carrillo crosswalks. As part of our inventory that we're doing, we're also inventorying what style of crosswalk was the flavor of the day, so to speak, when that was those crosswalks were originally painted, which signs. There's a wide variety in the city of what was installed. So part of the inventory is going to be identifying everything that's out there right now and standardizing. It might take a while. We might have to wait for repaving to happen, but we have created typical applications for different crosswalk types, like a minor collector, one-way type street, what that's going to look like. So they'll be standardized moving forward.
Great.
I guess the only response to that, the danger of standardization is you don't get to try new things. So the beauty of what we have out there is we've kept trying new things and trying to find what works. So I hope that spirit of try it and fix it still is employed with the standardization. Similar to what I saw, my last comment would be on the issue with the driveway near the shopping center. When you have a standard design, I think every time you go out and apply it, you do customize it. So there could be a way to customize the design on De La Vina. It wouldn't be as long as this. It wouldn't be as shaped like this. And maybe a different location could get us the access we need for the driveways and provide some sort of refuge for pedestrians there. So I hope that is something explored also. Viva standardization.
Other comments or questions? Yeah. Sure.
I just wanted to say one thing about the one near La Cumbre Junior High, Modoc and Portezuelo intersection, that is looking so great, and it works so much better for the drivers, as I've been watching that one. And one of the problems that they have there is people coming toward Mission, dropping their kids off next to the curb on Modoc without going around the corner onto Portezuelo. And it seems like maybe that middle median there would mitigate that. Maybe people wouldn't be so likely to stop there. I mean, the school's trying to educate parents and stuff, but it still happens.
Okay.
So that might help.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Coffin-Gray?
On your statistics, you mentioned the Federal Highway Administration says they came up with a 46% reduction in pedestrian involved crashes. Did they divide that up between major arterial streets versus the smaller collector type streets? Do we have a different statistics between the two?
I don't have that statistic. The 46% is just a blanket installations of all types. So
Okay,
I don't have that.
It just seems like the larger, the wider street, you're more apt to prevent a crash versus a smaller, narrower two-way street. And not having that statistic, I think it would be important to know the difference between the two, because we're looking at, two different types of streets here that we're trying to get the same solution to. I think the ones that we have in our city right now on the wider streets work very well. I'm a little concerned. You mentioned that that you had some input from the schools that they were interested with it. What about the residents in the neighborhood? Have we did a survey yet in the residents in the neighborhood for the smaller streets, the two-way streets?
We've not yet, no. Brownie?
That will occur as part of the East Side neighborhood planning effort that we're getting ready to embark upon.
Okay.
We'll have our first meeting next month with the residents, in the next month, early February, and that will be part of that conversation.
Okay, that's what I was hoping,
Yeah.
because I know in the past, when we did the neighborhood transport, NTMTs, that, neighbors were involved, and then they would put out their, ideas about this, because I hate to think that we're going forward with something that maybe the neighborhood doesn't want at this moment.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they might really want it, but, definitely we need to get the public's input on these.
Yeah, the timing with the of the Measure A application was the issue, and so we didn't want to lose an opportunity to be able to apply for the Measure A grant funds for this neighborhood. So we're going to apply for them, and so we're at least be in the queue, and we'll know whether or not we're successful in receiving the grant application by the time we have our final neighborhood meeting and before we go back before this committee. In terms of pedestrian bikes, there's way more applications that have been submitted as a pre-application than money's available, so it's going to be a very competitive process, but we just wanted to be in the queue.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you.
If I could respond to the your concern about the arterial versus collector crash statistic, you bring up a great point. And if you just look at Santa Barbara's experience with where pedestrian crashes are happening, and in terms of different intersections where they are happening, it's typically on the arterials where we're getting a history of multiple collisions. When you go back into more neighborhood type settings like a Mason Street or a Modoc and Portezuelo, there really isn't much of a crash history there. So it's more of a pedestrian yielding issue, making it easier to cross the street. I don't expect to bring down crash rates much at all if with these devices, just because they're typically not happening right now. There is no history there, so it's zero, and we can't really improve upon that statistic. But what we have heard from people are these are challenging places to get across the street, and we are trying to help that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. France?
Yeah.
Yeah, they've just gotten smart about it, about running across the street. And there's usually a crossing guard on Mason in the high traffic times.
Yeah, at Voluntario, we've heard Soledad, the other end of the school, is challenging.
Yeah, that's true. Mr. France?
Thank you, Chair Blackerby. So, Mr. Bailey, I appreciate starting this presentation, kind of going through what are the tools in the toolkit and approaching the East Side neighborhood transportation planning process, having some things ready to go, and Mr. Allen, you all getting this on the Measure A. These are great projects, I think, to have on the Measure A bike ped and Safe Routes to School process. And I'm really glad that you all have done this work. Maybe this isn't the tool that is the best option for the East Side residents. I'm definitely glad that we have this tool being presented before us, and we know that's an option that's on the table. So that's great. I guess to go back to the tool for not necessarily reducing crashes, but expressly reducing the hesitancy for people to safely cross, sense of safety in crossing crosswalks. We're looking at about 20 flashers and arterials that the city has or is now planning.
Planning.
Okay. And then this would be about 16 and maybe more, except there's some intersections that are kind of in question in terms of these pedestrian islands through the city.
Right. We've got 3 under design right now, and this Measure A application has 10 included.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, and those 10 that are presented to us are 10 that, in addition to that they work and that there's a need in that area, there's not a conflict with parcels alongside the intersection. And there are also intersections where there is an express need, but there is a conflict or perceived conflict with parcels adjacent to the intersection.
The intersections we have on our map here, just let me, that we have on our map here, there are typically no conflicts at these intersections. What we are going to run into, if we do move forward on the east side, is potentially losing a parking spot or two in order to create room for people to get around. There could be that type of conflict, but in terms of turning access, none of the locations that we've shown here will restrict turning access.
Cool. But then, in addition, you mentioned De La Vina and Arden, and one other where there's a conflict that you all are considering kind of taking that off the table.
Right, Arden and Kyler
Kyler
Ellis,
Ellis.
both. I'm quite concerned about the loss of left turn access, just based on past experiences with how people react to the loss of access.
Yeah.
So
What?
those are my concerns, obviously.
Because I was thinking about the access as you were going through this question, and specifically if you go to the slide of De La Vina and Arden, it's kind of three thresholds of access. One is access off the street at all, right? And nobody's talking about that.
Right.
Secondly, there's access from the street from the direction that you may be traveling. So, for example, going northbound or westbound, wanting to turn left into the parking lot across from Ralph's, you could turn left beforehand and then turn into that parking lot. Similarly, with Ralph's, you might not be able to turn left, but that parking lot is contiguous. Isn't that the comment? So then there's still access from the street in the direction that you may be traveling without having to U-turn or go around the block. It's just you can't turn at any point that you may choose to turn. And I would call into question whether that is the highest kind of priority that would block the priority of improving access for pedestrians. Because, for example, on De La Vina, both at Calle Lorales and at Arden, those are very difficult to cross. And it's I've been in that situation, specifically at Calle Lorales, trying to cross and not having anyone yield with my little cousin, who's 6 years old, and nobody yielded for over 30 seconds. So we're just sitting there, and I'm just explaining that it's okay that we have to wait as nobody stops for us in the marked crosswalk. And I think from a business perspective, you can certainly make the case that improved pedestrian access is a worthwhile trade-off for this tertiary tier, removal of every type of access possible to that parcel. So I think it's just important to kind of look at that access question. Nobody's talking about taking away access to parcels or even easy access. It's just every single option. I don't think it's a fair trade-off to say we can't even look at removing an option to get to a parcel. Obviously, that should be something that is in consideration if the need is there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Bradley?
I just wanted to comment that I'm in favor of the grant proposal. I think it's a good program. And, I agree with what Mr. France is saying. I also agree that since this is sort of the first time this is going to be tried in some places, that it's probably best to go with the least controversial locations for now and then add more later, since we have a limited amount of funding anyway. So.
Yeah. Mr. Rodriguez?
Yeah, I would like to add, piggyback on something Mr. Bradley said earlier about Cliff Drive. I respect that your choices on the presentation this evening, but I lived up on the Mesa for a good number of years, and I'm trying to remember, I think it was probably 30 years ago that an elderly acquaintance of mine was hit and killed on Cliff Drive. It's so dangerous when the sun is setting, and what you spoke about the dilemma of the pedestrian trying to dodge everything going both directions. I just wanted to take this opportunity to comment that I hope we can move in the Cliff Drive area with medians and extensive modification to slow that street down, especially at sunset. It's so dangerous.
Well, once the state and the city have finalized the transferring of Cliff Drive to the city of Santa Barbara, that's at the point in time where Derek and our staff can take a look at making modifications. But it's currently a state highway, and that's why it's not on the list to apply for grant funding. So it may be the next cycle. The cycle after that is when we can start taking a look at doing improvements to Cliff Drive.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to say how I think it's really exciting and refreshing that we're being able to kind of look at a concept before it comes down to the emotions of like, this one intersection, we must address it. Just to look at, like you said, a tool that we have and where it might be able to be applied. And the fact that we're doing a crosswalk inventory is really, I think, is really great. Just to see what we have so we don't have to figure it out as we go. So I just really appreciate that the department is working on that. And then you said the 20 flashers that are being put in throughout the city, are those all the rectangular rapid flashing beacons?
Yep.
Okay.
We're even going to be revisiting the 3 locations that we have, just the round yellow pulsing beacons, and potentially retrofitting those.
And in the concept of the mountable island, has it been discussed what the material on the inside? I think, are the ones on Cabrillo the bricks?
Cabrillo, the middle of those are landscaped.
Is there somewhere in the city that there's a pedestrian island that's bricks? I'm just assuming that we won't be doing bricks.
Well, if we put bricks, it would be just placed in,
Yeah.
because the cars won't be driving on over all
Yeah,
the time,
yeah.
like we had the sidewalk on the crosswalk where it was an issue. It has to be designed. It hasn't been designed yet.
Right.
We just have a concept. We want to do something, and once we get further in, it's going to probably have to go before the architecture board of review and all that. But most likely, possibly concrete total,
Yeah.
or bricks that can be removed sometime in the future if we find the money to put landscaping in. But I can tell you,
Right.
planning it is probably not something we're going to be able to do because of the maintenance issue with planning landscaping. Plus, it's really a small area.
Totally. Yeah, and that seems like it would be more distracting. We know how much people love that tree on Garden, so I'm sure they love that. I think that's all my comments. Were there other questions or comments? No? Okay. So we were just hearing a presentation, so we appreciate you presenting.
Great. Well, I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Next is endorsement of Measure A grant applications.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Madam Chair and members of the committee. We're in the process now of submitting applications to Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, SBCAG, for the next cycle of Measure A. So we have the pedestrian bicycle program. There's roughly $1 million, a little over $1 million available for the next 3 years in that program, as well as the Safe Route to School program, and there's about $1 million in that program as well. So staff has been working, both with the engineering staff, Derek and my staff in transportation planning, and coming up with projects that would be good candidates to submit for the Measure A program. And I'm bringing it before this committee because we have not submitted the application yet. We submitted the pre-application for the pedestrian bicycle program. The pre-application for the Safe Route program is due the end of next week. And we just want to review this with the committee to get your endorsement of what we are submitting. And so in the area of bicycle improvements, pedestrian bicycle, we're looking at the upper daily lane and crosswalk improvements that Derek mentioned in his previous report. Looking at applying for money to do a comprehensive update to the bicycle master plan, and we'll match all these projects. Will be matching with city funds. Sidewalk on Aliso Street is one of our missing links, and we're doing one side of the street, and we're going to be applying for community development block grant money to the other side of the street, and then design-only money for potential replacement to the pedestrian bridge over Cacique Street over in the east side. In the area of Safe Route to School, we're looking at a sidewalk on Lacumba Road over by the just north of State Street. Again, the Franklin Elementary School and the Lacumba Junior High School pedestrian refuge islands that Mr. Bailey mentioned in his presentation. Access ramps primarily over in the east side by the junior high school and the high school over in the east side. And then a school pedestrian and bicycle safety marketing educational program. We find that there's a problem with bicycling and individuals following the rules of the road, and just giving another tool that we can use when we're going out to the community, and especially at the elementary school with the Safe Route to School program. But we would have that developed both for elementary age students as well as secondary students, and the material we developed for the junior high school and high school students could easily be transferable to adults that can be out in the community. I think we've all seen bicyclists riding around town at night without lights, wearing dark clothing, no reflective devices, riding on the sidewalk. I've seen them riding on Anacapa Street, for example, heading upstream. So it's a problem in our community, and so we just want to do anything we can do to better inform the bicycling community of the rules of the road, as well as the motorists, too. Sometimes the motorists get agitated at a bicyclist who's actually following the rules, and they want them to get out of the way. So these are the applications that we intend on submitting the applications for. So the PED bike one is due on January the 11th, and the Safe Route to School is due, I believe it's February 3rd or 4th. So just want to present this to the committee tonight, get your feedback, ask for your endorsement of our applications so we can submit that as part of our process as well. So happy to answer questions.
Hey, I had a question about the Safe Routes to School, the Lacumba Road sidewalk. Is that up by La Colina Road, where those schools are?
It's
or?
by, what's the street? Derek knows.
Yeah, it basically begins at La Colina Road and goes north. There are some, the city-county boundary jogs in and out. We are proposing to fill in all the city sections, so bits and pieces all the way up to Cayecita, including enhancing the crosswalks at La Colina and Cayecita.
That's great.
We have called the county to see if they'd be willing to come up with some money to do the sidewalk in their jurisdiction as well. But, we only can use city monies in our city area. So in all cases, when we look at the application, we've looked at putting matching funds to give us the most points in terms of scoring, because there is a scoring criteria. So the more matching monies you have, the more points you get in that area. So if we come in with a project that is strictly going to be funded on Measure A, then we're not going to get as many credits towards that project. So we think all of these are very good projects to move forward with.
Yeah.
Well, in addition to these projects, we also are sponsoring, and it's not a capital project, but Traffic Solutions, the division of SBCAG, they have their Cyclemania program. We are going to be sponsoring that application for them. And then there's another, Coast has been working with us and Traffic Solutions, too, on an open streets program. They've asked us to sponsor that application as well. But it's not reflected in here in this report because it doesn't go towards the number of applications we can submit. And just for the committee's benefit, we can only submit applications for 4 projects in each category. So last time I think we submitted, I think 10 or 11 projects in total. So there's a limited amount of money, so no one agency takes advantage of the money that's available.
Right. Yeah, Mr. Coffman-Gray?
The question, that was kind of my piggyback on the question is, if they only, is there a ranking of these, or do you just submit them all at the same level and then they just decide which ones they want to approve, or do you rank them like these are the very top one I want, the city wants to get approved? And
we will rank them when we submit them, but each application will stand on its own. So I'm on the scoring committee. Mr. France serves on the committee as a member of the Bicycle Coalition. Coast is on the committee. I think Eva Imbar is the representative, as well as all the cities in the county and the county in the South County area. So there are evaluation criteria. So even though we might have a project that's rated number 1, it might not score as well as one of our other projects. So one of the things that we took a look at when we were looking at applying for grants is we identified what we consider to be our top priority project, and we didn't submit another project that would be competing against other projects. A good example, like we know we need to do a sidewalk on Hollister Avenue up by the airport. That would compete against some of our other projects. So maybe the next cycle, or maybe we can find some other alternative funding to do that project. So we don't want to compete against ourselves.
Okay.
questions or comments? No? Yeah, Mr. Bradley?
Yeah, since I'm on the board of a organization, a coast that's going to probably be competing for some of these, it would be a conflict of interest if I wouldn't endorse it, but I am going to endorse it, so I guess that's not a conflict of interest. But I just have a comment, especially on the education grant for the Safe Routes to School, that if the city gets that, I would encourage you to really coordinate that with Coast and the Bicycle Coalition and everything, so that everybody can sort of, because it's so similar to what's being done already, that it's good if it can be coordinated so that everybody uses their money in the best way possible.
Well, that's definitely the thought that we have in mind, is work closely with the Bicycle Coalition as well as Coast. It would, anything that we put together would be in conjunction with Coast. They are our Safe Route to School coordinator, and it'd be material that they would be using when they go into school. We also want to develop material that's for the secondary school children that we can use and also make it available to adults.
Okay.
And I just want to be clear that the projects that you are looking at tonight, there are city projects, and the Coast project that there are so many applications money for is being sponsored by the County of Santa Barbara, as well as the Bicycle Coalition. That's being sponsored by the county, so there won't be a conflict of interest by the two members of this committee who either work or serve on those boards.
Mm-hmm. Other comments, questions? Great. Well, I really appreciate you coming to tell us what you're going to apply for, because I think sometimes in the past it's been like, hey, we got this grant money, and we're like, great, we didn't even know we applied for it. So it's good to know what we're waiting for. And do we know, you said when the deadlines are, but when will we know?
So we'll be doing the scoring in the month of February, and I believe the scoring committee will meet the end of February, early March, to evaluate, compare notes basically, and make a final determination what a recommendation will be, and then that will go to the sub-regional committee, probably April, May, and the full board May, June. So we'll probably know by the end of March how we fare in terms of our applications and versus the other agencies. You know, last cycle we got all of our Safe Route to School projects funded. We had there was enough money to fund every single Safe Route to School project. Ped Bike, not so much.
Right.
So we're not, and Frank, in the Ped Bike area, there's a little over $2 million of projects that have been submitted through the pre-application process, and only $1 million is available. I'll know after the first of the year how many projects have been submitted for the Safe Route to School, and I'll let the committee know where we fare in that one. We might fare well, or we might be in the competition with our neighbors, but it's a good thing to problem to have, where we have a lot of projects in South County. One of my biggest concerns when we put this together is, will we have enough projects to go after this money? And it turns out we have more than enough projects to be submitting for this program, not just with the city, but with the city of Santa Barbara, as well as the Goleta and Carpinteria, as well as the county.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, Mr. Compton-Gray?
I'll make the motion that the TCC endorses the City of Santa Barbara's Measure A cycle to pedestrian and bicycle and Safe Routes to School applications.
All right. Is there a second? All right. Sworn seconds. All right. Any other discussion on the motion? No. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right. It's unanimous. And number 7, selection of chair and vice chair. A question for Mr. Allen. We had a little note passing back and forth here, but would it brings to mind the last time that I guess this might have been
A year ago.
a year ago or 2 years ago when did you join? 2 years ago, that we waited until the new committee members were on the committee before we selected the new chair and vice chair, so that they get to vote, or maybe one of them would be vice chair. And I was wondering if that might be something that the committee / staff would be open to.
That's the pleasure of the committee. You can certainly delay this action. We typically do it the last meeting of the year. We didn't have a December meeting last year. That's why we had it in January. In fact, the last 2 years we didn't have a December meeting. It's really up to the pleasure of the committee. We can hold off if you want. You can continue with the same chair and vice chair for another year. It's really up to the committee.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I know.
But I just want to give, and I'd love to hear people's input, but I want to give the new committee members a chance to, not that I think anything is going to be contentious or that it would be contested at all, but the new committee members to be able to select who their chair and vice chair is instead. Yeah, okay. Okay, so then we'll move that to our next meeting, whenever that shall be. Okay. Okay. And did we need to go over this schedule, or is this just for our information? Okay. Okay. So we made it within an hour. Sorry. So a motion to adjourn would be in order?
I'd make that motion, and mostly because I forgot in my comments earlier to say one thing, so I was going to make the motion. If I can add in there an appreciation of staff. I worked here 25 years ago, and at a time when several projects came down the pike, there was a lot of paving and engineering heavy solutions coming from the Public Works Department at that time, and I think we have come a long way as a city and a long way as the staff here. So a lot of, I think, the work that we're relied on to do is done behind the scenes by our able-bodied staff people. So for all the folks who've come before us over the last 8 years and brought these wonderful projects and kept us out of trouble, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
All right. Any opposition to adjourning? Yeah, I didn't think so. All right. We're adjourned. Happy holidays.